Number 1. This story takes place when I was 14 years old in the summer. It was around 11 PM, and I was in my bedroom on my computer. I was living with my older brother at the time, because our parents were in Florida for a while. We had just gotten home. My brother and I were the only ones home, and the only ones with access to the house. I needed a photo of myself for something. I don't remember what exactly, so I opened up my camera roll on my computer to find one. I found this picture on my camera roll. Immediately, my whole body froze and I couldn't move. I had never taken this picture. I closed the camera roll and sat on my bed for a while. I began shaking, and tears of fright came to my eyes. I gained the courage to open the camera roll one more time to look again. I stared at the photo for at least 10 minutes, feeling more uneasy every second. I checked the time that the picture was taken, and that only made me more distressed. The picture was taken at 9:45 PM. My brother and I both left the house at 8 to get dinner. No one was home at the time the picture was taken. Afraid to leave my room, I picked up my phone and messaged my brother. I told him I was so scared I couldn't move, and that he had to come to my room immediately. He asked what was wrong, and I sent him the picture from my computer, along with what happened. Him, thinking it was a joke, simply told me good night. So I called him. He could obviously hear my crying, and burst into my room with a golf club. At this point, we're both shitting our pants, staring at the blurry picture of a man we didn't recognize. We proceeded to swipe all 4 floors of our house. We didn't see anything sketchy on the top 3 floors, so we walked down to the basement, my brother leading the way. "Shit," he whispered. I looked to the back corner of the basement, where there's a cellar door that leads to the outside. The door and the hatch that covers the steps to the outside were both wide open. We called the police and showed them the picture. They told us to lock our doors and to call them if we heard or saw anything. We locked the doors and both sat in his room for the rest of the night. Whoever was in our house and on my computer must have opened the computer and opened the camera by accident. They then must have accidentally pressed the spacebar, not realizing the camera was open in the background, and snapped the picture of themselves. I still wonder why someone would just break into a house for nothing. Nothing was stolen. No drawers or cabinets were open. Nothing seemed out of place. I'm just glad he wasn't there when we both got back. Number 2. About 5 months ago, a friend of mine was expelled from his university program because of bad marks. He was only halfway through his lease, and didn't see the point in staying in the city, since he was only there for school in the first place. He told me that if I wanted to take over his lease as a subletter, he'd only charge me half the rent, which I thought was a pretty sweet deal. Although I'm from this town, I thought it was time to leave my parents' place. I'd already graduated, and although I'd been looking for a new job for a while, I still felt like I couldn't miss out on this opportunity. So I took over his lease and moved into his place. The house itself is actually pretty nice. It's 3 floors, including the basement, and it's located near the university of my town, which isn't a very safe area overall. But I spent a lot of my university years here, and never felt unsafe. The room in the basement is pretty small but cozy, and the only other room down there belongs to a girl who's currently a student, and she's pretty quiet. Actually, all of the girls living here are pretty good roommates. I wasn't thrilled about living with 3 girls, but now I don't see why I would have thought that was an issue. They're all pretty great and a good time. I'm the only one in the house who isn't a student, and also the only one who's originally from this town. The other roommates are actually all from cities that are about an hour or two away at most. So, unless there's something special going on, they all go home on the weekends. My friend who got expelled also only lives about 2 hours away, so he would always go home on weekends as well. One thing I forgot to mention, which is pretty crucial to the story, is that the house actually has 5 bedrooms. But right when they all moved into the place, one of the girls had a seizure on her bed and passed away. This was upsetting for everyone, and the landlord told them not to worry about finding anyone else. Their rent never went up or anything, and the room was left vacant. According to the landlord, he just found it insensitive to try and find someone, because he didn't want to turn someone's death into a financial inconvenience for him. So, after the girl's death, her parents came and took her belongings out of the room, and it just remained empty since then. I actually never looked in there, because it just remained locked, and I don't really have much curiosity to see the room. It's on the 2nd floor, and I never go up there, so I never paid much attention to it. The first weekend I spent there was pretty uneventful. I should mention here that I'm gay, and I remember that I spent the first night at my boyfriend's place, and then the next night he slept over at mine. We were pretty wasted, so we passed out as soon as we got home. We'd been out drinking at one of the college bars. The next weekend, I was at home in my new room, and I couldn't sleep, so I decided to do a little reading. I was really enjoying the quietness of this new house, since the girls weren't home at all. I come from a Latino family, so this quiet and serene environment was pretty rare. I thought I heard a few noises coming from upstairs, so I figured that one of the girls had probably decided to stay the weekend at the house, or that she was just getting some last-minute things ready before heading home. I wasn't very close with the roommates, so I didn't even bother asking any of them if they had stayed home. I just felt like it was none of my business. The girl in the basement was for sure gone that weekend, because she apparently sleeps with her door locked and keeps it open whenever she's not home. One weekend on that same month, I woke up to pee, and I could hear a toilet flushing upstairs, which was kind of weird since I knew none of the girls were home. I was gonna go and check it out, but in my tired state I was too lazy. It's funny, horror movies are supposed to make you paranoid, but the biggest lesson I got from them was that there's always a rational explanation for everything. This would prove to be my biggest mistake, because for a couple of months I was always brushing things off. For example, I heard creaking coming from the 2nd floor, and figured one of the girls must have forgotten something, and decided to come by to pick it up. But in hindsight, that was irrational. The girl would have had to drive 2 hours down, and then 2 hours back to her hometown in the middle of the night, just to pick something up. One Saturday, I woke up to get some water, and noticed that the roommate in the basement was gone. Her door was open, and her car wasn't in the driveway. In fact, there weren't any cars in the driveway, but I should mention that one of the girls doesn't drive. A couple of hours later, I woke up because I heard footsteps coming from down in the basement. At this point, I yelled out the girl's name who doesn't drive, because she's the only one who could have been in the house. I didn't get a reply, and just heard the steps going back upstairs. I started getting uneasy about being home on the weekends, so I decided to just spend them at my boyfriend's instead. One of the girls made a house Facebook page, which was supposed to address any issues like washing dishes or leaving messes, but it remained pretty inactive since everyone seemed to get along. I posted on there that some creepy stuff was happening on the weekends, and asked them if they could just start letting me know if they'd be home for the night or not. They seriously thought I was joking around. Even my boyfriend agreed that I was being paranoid, because he too agreed that everything has a rational explanation. The thing is, when you say that everything has an explanation, you're only invalidating the paranormal, which wasn't what I was implying at all. I've never believed in ghosts or spirits or any of that jazz, and I've never claimed to when I spoke to my roommates or my boyfriend. They kept on saying that the house was old and made noises, but I know the difference between old house noises and someone walking up and down the stairs. My roommates did start posting things on Facebook, letting me know whether they were gone or not. It was always to the effect of, "Hey, I won't be home this weekend, so don't worry about the ghosts." One weekend, they all let me know that they wouldn't be at the house, and my boyfriend was on the midnight shift, so I had to spend the night on my own. My boyfriend called me on his break, and while I was on the phone, I heard noises coming from the main floor. I told him I was going to go and check it out, and he told me to go ahead, because he still thought I was paranoid. As I told him I was going to investigate over the phone, I heard the footsteps going back up to the second floor. Once I got onto the main floor, there was nobody in the kitchen, and all of the doors in the house were locked. I was extremely paranoid, and really didn't feel safe. My boyfriend calmed me down, and convinced me that everything was fine. After that weekend, I told my roommates in all seriousness that I was convinced that someone had been in our house at some point that night. I told them what I heard, and they all still claim that it was just the old house making noises. My boyfriend was almost permanently on midnight shifts, so I did what I never wanted to do, and started spending weekends at my parents' place. The girls still posted on the page when they weren't staying at the house, so I started doing the same. One Friday night, the Facebook page read the following: Roommate 1, not sleeping at the house. Roommate 2, not sleeping at the house. Roommate 3, staying at the house because of midterm exams. And like I said, I was staying at my parents' place. The next morning, I received a frantic text from one of the roommates saying that the girl who had her midterms had been attacked. She was in her room studying and heard a noise right outside her bedroom door. When she went out to inspect it, she was greeted by a man walking out of the dead girl's room. I later found out more details about the whole thing from the roommate who was attacked. The man looked rough, had greasy hair and a really dirty face. When they made eye contact, he held his finger up to his mouth and uttered, "Shh," while smiling. The nail on his finger was long, and his beard was apparently really scraggly and uneven, like it only grew on certain parts of his face. She screamed out of instinct, even though she knew there was nobody home. He lunged at her as she tried to shut the door. He growled and told her to shut her mouth and said something like, "I'm not gonna rape you, just keep your mouth shut." He beat her up, but not completely unconscious, and then, when he walked out of her room, he went downstairs and walked out the front door, leaving the dead girl's room unlocked. My roommate locked herself in her room and called the police. What's pretty creepy about the whole thing is that when they inspected the dead girl's room, they kept asking, "So nobody lived in this room for how long? Are you sure nobody's been renting this room? Did her parents take everything when she passed away?" It turns out that the guy had a really sweet setup and had brought his own small mattress to put over the bed frame. He left most of his stuff because he probably didn't expect a confrontation that night. I don't think he knew she was there, because she never usually was. It probably sucked for him when I moved in, because before me, the bastard had the whole house to himself for 2 days a week. The police did ask me quite a lot of questions, and were very interested about hearing my statement, especially regarding the footsteps at night. My 3 roommates and my friend are now convinced that maybe the girl didn't die the way they said, and potentially he murdered her. But I think the autopsy would have been able to distinguish a murder from a seizure. But in their defense, the whole thing is really creepy. We're not really sure how long the guy had been living here, but it's very likely that it was for at least a few months. The theory is that this guy had been climbing in through the window, so it's possible that he was even there on the weekdays. The police are really interested in talking to the landlord because they want to know how the man found out about the vacant room. The landlord's a pretty decent guy though, so I don't think there's anything going on there. I do really wish that people were more willing to listen to me. I even said it might be a squatter, which everyone laughed at. This happened very recently, so it might be a while before an update. As of right now, the man has not been found, though the police say they're optimistic about finding him, whatever that means. I'm just glad the girl's okay. This has been a pretty terrible month for me, and I don't know if I want to stay in that house anymore. I don't have much left on the lease, so it might be best just to leave the place now. I doubt the guy'll come back, because all of his stuff's been taken out. But I still find it creepy in this house, and I definitely don't spend my weekends here anymore. Number 3. When I was 14, I would spend the summer holidays away from school at home. In the small village I lived in, this meant I mainly spent my days on my own, just watching TV and playing The Sims. My parents were generally out of the house from 8 AM until 5 PM. I was raised to never answer the door to strangers. However, my favourite spot in the living room was right next to the window, so I could always see people on the street, and in turn, they could see me. One day, I was sat watching daytime TV when I noticed a man walking down our street. As our street has a dead end, I normally recognize everyone who walks down it, but I'd certainly never seen this guy before. He was tall, thin, and unshaven. He was wearing a hooded jumper, with the hood up and his sleeves rolled up as well, revealing tattoos on his arms. He was carrying a large duffel bag, and was looking closely at each house he passed. As I was sat there watching him, I was clearly in full view. He started to pass our house, and when he saw me, he smiled and started walking up our short drive. He came up to our front door and knocked. I knew I shouldn't answer, but he had seen me, and at 14 I was afraid of being rude to an adult, so I obediently went and opened the door a crack. I peeked around the door and said hello. As he spoke, he pulled the duffel bag around to the front of his body and asked me if my parents were home. At this point, I figured he'd probably leave if I said no, but instead, he stepped forward towards the door and unzipped the bag. Well, the thing is, I just got out of prison. I want to do the right thing, you know? It's so hard to find a job, so I'm trying to sell some things. He started pulling towels, handkerchiefs, and other junk out of his bag. The word prison made my heart skip a beat, and I quickly mumbled something about having no money, and I closed the door on him. He stood outside my door for a minute, still talking to me about being able to help. So I went upstairs and waited for him to leave, which he eventually did. I soon settled back down to watching the TV and forgot all about the encounter. At 5 PM, my parents came home and they took the TV, so I went up to my room. A little while later, there was a knock at the door. I came onto the landing and peered down as my mum answered. 2 police officers were stood there on the step. They asked if anyone had come by that day. My mum said no one had, and that's when I remembered my visitor from earlier. I came down the stairs and said that actually someone had called by. Seeing as I was young, the 2 police officers asked to come inside and talk to me. They asked me to describe the man and the conversation I had with him. They seemed really worried and kept telling me not to worry and to be honest about what happened. Once I'd told them everything, they asked to speak to my parents on their own, and then they thanked me and left. I was straight on at my parents, asking them what was going on. My mum explained that a few minutes after the guy had come to our house, he had gone to another girl's house. She was in the shower and hadn't answered the door when he knocked. Apparently, he let himself into the house and walked upstairs. When he found her in the shower, he sexually assaulted her. With my description and the evidence from the girl, they tracked the guy down. It turned out he had just been released from prison for a similar attack on another girl. I never answer the door when I'm alone now, and I refuse to shower when I'm home alone. Hi guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Just a few good stories I came across on my internet travels. I hope you all enjoyed them, because I thought they were pretty good. As always, be sure to smash that like button or I'll smash you, and I'll have another set of stories coming for you guys very, very soon. Until then, stay spooky, and remember, the best things happen in the dark.